The crystal water glass shattered against the marble floor of Les Bernardin's private dining room, sending fragments skittering beneath the mahogany table where 12 of Manhattan's most powerful real estate developers sat frozen in their chairs. Elena Martinez felt the cold champagne seeping through her uniform stockings as she knelt to collect the pieces, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the exhaustion of her third double shift this week. Above her, Richard Blackstone's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade through silk. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Look at this," he said, gesturing toward Elena with his gold-ringed hand as if she were an exhibit in a museum of human inadequacy. "This is exactly what I mean about the degradation of service in this city. Worthless. Absolutely worthless. Can't even pour a glass of water without destroying property worth more than she makes in a month." Elena's fingers closed around a particularly sharp piece of glass, and she felt the warm trickle of blood mixing with the spilled champagne. She didn't flinch. 23 years of life had taught her that showing pain only invited more of it. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Mija, dignity costs nothing, but is worth everything," as she continued gathering the fragments into her serving tray. Marcus Chen, the restaurant's floor manager, appeared at her elbow with a towel. His face a carefully composed mask that she recognized as barely contained rage on her behalf. He'd been her guardian angel since she'd started at Les Bernardin 2 years ago, fresh off a Greyhound bus from El Paso with nothing but a high school diploma and a determination to send money home to her younger siblings. "Mr. Blackstone," Marcus said, his voice carrying the practiced deference of someone who had learned to swallow pride as a professional skill. "I apologize for the disturbance. Elena is actually one of our most— I don't care if she's your employee of the month," Blackstone interrupted, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Elena's bent form. "She's worthless to me, and that's all that matters in this room. Do you know who I am? I own 17 buildings in this city. I decide whether places like this survive or become another boutique hotel. And right now, I'm deciding that your little waitress here just cost you my business." The other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. Harold Morrison, a silver-haired developer who'd been Blackstone's rival for 3 decades, cleared his throat. "Richard, perhaps we should— what, Harold?" Blackstone's voice rose, carrying the particular venom reserved for his oldest competitor. "Show mercy, compassion? Those are words for weak men. Men like you who let your empire stagnate while mine grows. This girl," he pointed at Elena again, "is a perfect metaphor for everything wrong with your philosophy. You probably think she deserves $15 an hour and health benefits." Elena's fingers closed around a particularly sharp piece of glass, and she felt the warm trickle of blood mixing with the spilled champagne. She didn't flinch. 23 years of life had taught her that showing pain only invited more of it. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Mija, dignity costs nothing, but is worth everything," as she continued gathering the fragments into her serving tray. Marcus Chen, the restaurant's floor manager, appeared at her elbow with a towel, his face a carefully composed mask that she recognized as barely contained rage on her behalf. He'd been her guardian angel since she'd started at Les Bernardin 2 years ago, fresh off a Greyhound bus from El Paso with nothing but a high school diploma and a determination to send money home to her younger siblings. "Mr. Blackstone," Marcus said, his voice carrying the practiced deference of someone who had learned to swallow pride as a professional skill. "I apologize for the disturbance. Elena is actually one of our most— I don't care if she's your employee of the month," Blackstone interrupted, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Elena's bent form. "She's worthless to me, and that's all that matters in this room. Do you know who I am? I own 17 buildings in this city. I decide whether places like this survive or become another boutique hotel. And right now, I'm deciding that your little waitress here just cost you my business." The other men at the table shifted uncomfortably. Harold Morrison, a silver-haired developer who'd been Blackstone's rival for 3 decades, cleared his throat. "Richard, perhaps we should..." "Should what, Harold?" Blackstone's voice rose, carrying the particular venom reserved for his oldest competitor. "Show mercy, compassion? Those are words for weak men. Men like you who let your empire stagnate while mine grows. This girl," he pointed at Elena again, "is a perfect metaphor for everything wrong with your philosophy. You probably think she deserves $15 an hour and health benefits." Elena stood slowly, the tray of broken glass balanced in her hands. For the first time since the incident began, she looked directly at Richard Blackstone. He was 68 years old, with a face carved from ambition and cruelty, his tailored suit worth more than her family's combined annual income. But there was something else in his eyes, something she recognized from the mirror on her worst days, a fundamental loneliness that no amount of money could fill. "I'm sorry about the glass, Mr. Blackstone," she said, her voice steady despite the blood dripping from her palm. "It was an accident. I haven't slept in 36 hours because I'm working 3 jobs to put my brother through college. But you're right. To you, I am worthless. I'm just someone who brings you food and cleans up after you. I don't own buildings or make decisions that affect thousands of people. I just try to survive each day and help my family do the same." The room fell silent. Even the ambient kitchen noise seemed to fade. Blackstone's face flushed red, then purple, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Harold Morrison leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "How dare you speak to me?" he finally managed, spittle flying from his lips. "You're nothing. You're less than nothing. You're—" He stopped mid-sentence, his hand clutching at his chest. The color drained from his face as quickly as it had come. The water glass in his hand, the replacement Elena had just poured, tumbled to the table, spreading across the massive real estate contracts they'd been reviewing. "Richard?" Harold Morrison was on his feet immediately, his rivalry forgotten in the face of human crisis. "Someone call 911." Elena dropped the tray of broken glass, the crash lost in the sudden chaos of 12 powerful men scrambling to help their peer. She pressed her uninjured hand to Blackstone's neck, feeling for a pulse, while Marcus called for an ambulance. Blackstone's eyes found hers, wide with fear and something else. Recognition, perhaps, that in this moment the worthless waitress was the only one who knew what to do. "Don't try to speak," she said softly, loosening his tie with practiced efficiency. She'd watched her grandmother die of a heart attack, had learned CPR at the community center, and had spent countless hours volunteering at the free clinic in her neighborhood. Help is coming. But even as the paramedics burst through the door 7 minutes later, even as they loaded Richard Blackstone onto a stretcher while he clutched at his chest, Elena saw something in Harold Morrison's eyes that made her stomach twist with an emotion she couldn't name. He was watching her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her blood-stained uniform to something deeper. The private dining room emptied until Elena, Marcus, and Harold Morrison stood by the window overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. The broken glass still glittered on the floor, mixing with the spilled champagne and contracts that represented billions of dollars in real estate deals. "What's your full name?" Morrison asked without turning around. "Elena Maria Martinez," she replied, pressing a napkin to her bleeding palm. "How old are you, Elena?" 23. Morrison turned then, and she saw that his eyes were wet with unshed tears. "My daughter would have been 23 this year. She died in a car accident 5 years ago. She had your same spirit, that same refusal to be diminished by cruel men." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, crossing the room to hand it to her. "Richard Blackstone is my oldest enemy and my greatest rival. We've been fighting over this city for 30 years. But what you might not know is that we were once friends. best friends, before money and power poisoned everything between us, before he became what you saw tonight. Elena took the card with her uninjured hand. It was simple, elegant. Harold Morrison, Morrison Development Group, with a phone number. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Morrison smiled sadly. "Because I have a feeling this isn't over. Richard Blackstone doesn't have heart attacks. He gives them to other people. Something happened tonight, something beyond the medical. And somehow I think you're going to be part of what comes next." He moved toward the door, then paused. "That thing you said about working 3 jobs to put your brother through college, is that true?" "Every word." "What's he studying?" "Business and urban planning. He wants to build affordable housing, communities where families like ours can actually afford to live." Morrison's smile became warmer, more genuine. Idealistic. Richard would hate that. He paused at the door. "Keep that card, Elena. Something tells me you're going to need it sooner than you think." Elena's alarm shrieked at 4:30 a.m., joining the symphony of sirens and garbage trucks that served as the soundtrack to her Washington Heights apartment. She silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake her roommates, Sophia, who worked nights at the hospital, and Carmen, who'd been unemployed for 3 months and had finally started sleeping through the night without anxiety medication. The apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that seemed to lean slightly to the left, as if exhausted from its 100-year battle against gravity. The walls were thin enough that Elena knew Mr. Rodriguez in 4C was making his morning coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, and that the Chen family's baby in 4A had finally stopped teething. She moved through her morning routine in near darkness, a choreography perfected by repetition. Shower in the bathroom with the broken tiles and persistent leak, dress in one of her 3 server uniforms, apply the minimum makeup required to look presentable for the kind of clientele who noticed everything and tipped accordingly. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother Miguel in El Paso. "Midterm went great. Professor says I have real potential. Thank you, hermana. I know what you're sacrificing." She smiled, the expression transforming her tired face into something luminous. Miguel didn't know the half of it, didn't know about the 3rd job she'd picked up cleaning offices, or the plasma donations twice a week, or the way she'd learned to make a single meal last 2 days. He thought she was living her dream in New York, not understanding that her dream had become simply ensuring he could achieve his. The coffee maker, a thrift store find held together with duct tape and prayer, gurgled to life. While it brewed, Elena examined her palm where the glass had cut her the night before. The wound was clean but deep, a crescent moon of split skin that would make carrying trays agony. She wrapped it carefully in gauze and medical tape, stolen from the restaurant's first aid kit, then covered it with a skin-colored bandage that might fool a casual observer. Her mother's photograph watched from its place of honor on the kitchen counter. Maria Elena Martinez, taken 2 years before the cancer, smiling with a joy that poverty could never quite extinguish. Elena touched the frame gently, a morning ritual. "I'm trying, Mama. I'm trying to be the person you believed I could be." The subway ride to her first job took 45 minutes on a good day, an hour and a half when the universe decided to test her patience. This morning fell somewhere in between, delayed by signal problems and what the conductor euphemistically called passenger medical attention. Elena stood pressed between a man who'd apparently never heard of deodorant and a woman having a loud phone argument with someone named Bradley about custody arrangements. She used the time to review her notes for the online business course she was taking, financial statements and market analysis crammed into the margins of her days. The office building on Madison Avenue existed in a different universe from her apartment, all gleaming surfaces and security guards who looked through her as if she were transparent. She changed into her cleaning uniform in a supply closet that smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, then began her rounds, emptying trash cans full of barely eaten $100 lunches, scrubbing bathrooms that were cleaner than her own apartment, and polishing windows that looked out onto a city that felt simultaneously like home and like another planet. It was on the 37th floor, in an office that belonged to someone important enough to have a corner view, but not important enough to have their name on the door, that Elena found the newspaper. The business section left open to an article about last night's emergency: Richard Blackstone hospitalized during major real estate summit. Fascinating reading. Elena jumped, nearly knocking over the executive's coffee mug. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-40s, sharp suit, eyes like winter mornings. "I'm sorry, I was just—" "You're the waitress from last night." It wasn't a question. The woman entered the office, closing the door behind her. "I'm Patricia Wong, CFO of Morrison Development. Harold asked me to keep an eye out for you."
Elena's confusion must have shown because Patricia smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Harold Morrison owns this building. Well, technically his company does. He also owns the cleaning service you work for, though I doubt they advertised that when they hired you. I don't understand. Patricia moved to the window, her reflections superimposed on the city below. Harold Morrison is particular about people. When someone catches his attention, he likes to know more about them. Your employee file makes for interesting reading. Top of your high school class, turned down a scholarship to Columbia to care for your sick mother, now working yourself to death to support your family. She turned back to Elena. "He wanted me to give you this." She held out an envelope, thick, cream-colored, expensive. Elena didn't take it. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's an opportunity. There's a position opening at Morrison Development. Entry-level, but with real growth potential. The pay is substantial. Enough that you could quit your other jobs, maybe even take some classes during the day." Elena felt tears threatening, anger and exhaustion and hope all tangled together. Why would he do that? He doesn't know me. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Harold Morrison and Richard Blackstone have been enemies for 30 years, but they've also been connected by something neither of them likes to discuss. Harold's daughter Sarah and Richard's son James were secretly dating before she died. Richard forbade the relationship, said a Morrison wasn't good enough for his son. The night Sarah died, she was driving back from a confrontation with Richard where he'd threatened to disinherit James if they didn't break up. The office felt suddenly airless. Elena sank into the executive's chair, not caring about protocol. Patricia continued. Harold's never forgiven himself for not protecting her from Richard's cruelty, and Richard's never forgiven himself, period, though he'd die before admitting it. When Harold saw you stand up to Richard last night, saw you help him despite everything he'd said, it reminded him of Sarah. She had that same grace under pressure, that same refusal to let cruelty make her cruel. What happened to James, Richard's son? He killed himself 6 months after Sarah's accident. Left a note saying he couldn't live in a world where love meant so little and money meant so much. Patricia placed the envelope on the desk. The offer stands. Think about it. After Patricia left, Elena finished cleaning the office in a daze. The envelope seemed to pulse with possibility, but also with complication. She'd learned early that nothing in New York was free, that every gift came with strings attached, visible or otherwise. Her shift at the restaurant started at 11. She changed in the same bathroom stall where she'd cried after her first brutal day 2 years ago, transforming back into the composed server who could handle entitled customers and impossible demands with a smile. Marcus was waiting for her at the staff entrance, his face grave. Blackstone's lawyers have been calling all morning. They're threatening to sue the restaurant, saying you caused his heart attack with your aggressive confrontation. Why, of course they are. Management wants to fire you, to make it all go away. Marcus's hands clenched and unclenched, a tell she recognized from the times he'd stood between her and handsy customers. I told them I'd quit if they did. So did 3 other servers. Marcus, no! You have a family. So do you. Just because they're not here doesn't make them less real. He pulled her into a quick hug. Professional boundaries be damned. We protect each other here. That's how we survive. The lunch shift passed in a blur of orders and fake smiles. Every time the door opened, Elena expected to see lawyers or police or some other consequence of last night's confrontation. Instead, she saw regular customers who didn't know her name, tourists who photographed their food while it got cold, businessmen who discussed million-dollar deals over $40 salads. It was during the late afternoon lull that Harold Morrison himself walked in. He looked older in daylight, the lines around his eyes deeper, his silver hair catching the light from the windows. He requested Elena's section specifically, ordered only coffee, and waited until she had no other tables to attend. "Did Patricia find you?"
She did. "And?" Elena set down the coffee pot, met his eyes directly. "Why do you really want to help me? And don't tell me it's because I remind you of your daughter. That's part of it, but not all." Morrison smiled, the expression transforming his face. "You're sharp? Sarah would have liked you." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase, placed it on the table. "Richard Blackstone is dying. Not from last night. That was mild. He'll recover. But he has pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Maybe 6 months left. He's hidden it from everyone, including his board of directors." Elena felt the world tilt. "How do you know?" "We use the same private physician. HIPAA laws mean nothing to men like us, I'm afraid." His expression was grim. "Richard has no heirs. James was his only child. His ex-wives hate him. His siblings haven't spoken to him in decades. He's going to die alone with $50 billion and no one to leave it to. That's sad. It's pathetic. But it's also an opportunity." Morrison opened the folder, revealing documents covered in legal text. For the past year, Richard's been liquidating assets, setting up a trust. He won't leave his empire to me. He'd rather burn it all than let a Morrison have it. But he's been searching for something. Someone. He's had private investigators looking into every employee he's ever fired, every person he's ever wronged, trying to find one who didn't let his cruelty break them. Elena's hands trembled as she refilled his coffee. "You think he's looking for me?" "I think last night wasn't an accident. I think Richard knew exactly who you were when he walked into that room. Your name was on a list his investigators compiled. People who'd shown unusual integrity despite hardship. He came here to test you, to see if you were what his investigators claimed. That's insane. That's Richard Blackstone. He once bought an entire company just to fire the CEO who'd insulted him at a party 20 years earlier. He plays games with people's lives because he can." Morrison closed the folder. "The job offer isn't charity, Elena. I need someone on the inside when Richard makes his move. Someone he'll trust, or at least someone he'll underestimate." Elena felt her anger rising, clean and sharp. "So you want to use me too, as a pawn in your sick game with him?" "Yes." Morrison's honesty was brutal. "But I also want to give you the tools to play the game yourself. Richard Blackstone destroyed my daughter. Not directly, but through his cruelty, his belief that money mattered more than love. I can't bring Sarah back, but maybe I can help someone else survive him." The summons arrived at Elena's apartment 3 days later, delivered by a courier who looked uncomfortable standing in the graffiti-covered hallway. Her roommate Sophia answered the door in scrubs, having just returned from a night shift at the hospital. "Elena Martinez?" the courier asked, eyeing the water-stained ceiling with barely concealed disdain. "She's at work," Sophia replied, her exhaustion making her blunt. "I can sign for it." The envelope was heavy, made of paper so expensive it felt like fabric. Sophia placed it on the kitchen table, next to the stack of overdue bills and Miguel's latest letter from college. When Elena finally returned home at midnight, having worked all 3 jobs in succession, she found Sophia and Carmen waiting for her in the living room, the envelope unopened between them like an unexploded bomb. "It's from Blackstone Industries. The return address is their legal department." Elena's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto their salvaged couch, springs creaking in protest. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was not a lawsuit, but something far more unsettling. An invitation, printed on cardstock so thick it could have been used as a weapon. "Mr. Richard Blackstone requests your presence at his private estate in the Hamptons this Saturday at 2 p.m. A car will be provided. Business attire required." This is not a request.
Beneath the formal invitation was a handwritten note in shaky script. "We have unfinished business, Miss Martinez. Don't disappoint me again." "You're not going," Sophia said immediately. "This is insane. The man called you worthless, and now he's summoning you to his estate? It's like something out of a horror movie." Carmen, ever practical, was already on her phone. "His estate is worth $47 million, according to Google. Guards, gates, the works. If he wanted to hurt you, Elena, he wouldn't need to invite you to his house to do it." Elena read the invitation again, then noticed something else in the envelope. A check for $5,000 marked consultation fee. Services to be rendered. "Jesus Christ, that's more than I make in a month." "It's more than I make in 2 months, Elena corrected, staring at the check. It would cover Miguel's next semester, pay off their mother's remaining medical debt, even leave enough for groceries that weren't from the dollar store. Her phone buzzed. Harold Morrison's name appeared on the screen. "I heard about the invitation," he said without preamble when she answered. "Richard called me an hour ago, gloating. He wants me to know he's making some kind of move." "Should I go?" "That's your decision, but if you do, don't go alone. I'm sending Patricia Wong as your attorney. Richard won't try anything with a witness present, especially one who knows where all his bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking." Elena found herself at the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Richard Blackstone was dying in luxury while she was killing herself to survive. The unfairness of it all made her chest tight with rage. "I'll go, but I keep the check regardless of what happens." Morrison chuckled. "You're learning. Good." Saturday arrived gray and humid, the kind of New York summer day that made the city feel like a mouth. Patricia Wong arrived in the black town car at precisely noon, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Elena's annual rent. She'd brought a garment bag with her. "I guessed your size," she said, handing it to Elena. "You can't walk into Richard Blackstone's world dressed like someone he can dismiss." The outfit was perfect. A charcoal dress that whispered money rather than shouting it, shoes that were designer but understated, a bag that could have passed for ordinary if you didn't know what to look for. Elena felt like she was wearing armor, or maybe a disguise. Perhaps they were the same thing. The drive to the Hamptons took 3 hours, traffic crawling through Queens and Nassau County, before finally opening up as they reached Suffolk. Patricia spent the time briefing Elena on Richard Blackstone's empire. Not just the real estate, but the web of holdings and shell companies, the political connections, the enemies and allies. He built his first building at 25, using money he supposedly inherited from his grandfather. But Harold did some digging years ago. There was no inheritance. The seed money came from somewhere else, somewhere Richard has spent 40 years hiding. Mob connections? Possibly, or something worse. Money that dirty doesn't just wash itself clean, no matter how many legitimate businesses you filter it through. The estate gates appeared through the rain that had started falling, iron and imposing, with cameras that tracked their approach. The driveway was a quarter-mile of pristine asphalt lined with trees that had been shaped into perfect symmetry. The house itself was a monument to excess, 32 rooms, according to Patricia, with a staff of 12 and security that would make the White House jealous. Richard Blackstone received them in his study, a room that could have swallowed Elena's entire apartment. He looked smaller than he had at the restaurant, diminished somehow despite the grandeur surrounding him. The heart attack had left its mark, a grayness to his skin, a tremor in his hands that he tried to hide by keeping them folded.
"Miss Martinez," he said, not rising from his leather chair. "You came. You paid me to." He smiled, the expression sharp as winter. "Honest, I appreciate that in my employees." "I'm not your employee." "Not yet." He gestured to chairs across from his massive desk. "Sit, both of you. Miss Wong, I'm surprised Harold let you off your leash." Patricia's smile was equally sharp. "I'm here as Miss Martinez's legal counsel. She doesn't sign anything without my review." "Cautious, smart." Blackstone's attention returned to Elena. "Do you know why you're here?" "No." "Liar." He stood, moving to a wall of windows that overlooked manicured gardens and, beyond them, the ocean. "You're here because you did something no one has done in 30 years. You made me feel ashamed." Elena said nothing, having learned that silence was often the best response to powerful men's confessions. "That moment," he continued, "when I was on the ground, heart seizing, certain I was dying, you helped me. After everything I'd said, you helped me. Do you know what my first thought was? No. That I didn't deserve it. That I deserved to die on that floor, choking on my own cruelty." He turned back to them, and Elena saw something she hadn't expected. Tears. "I have 6 months to live. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I've known for 3 months, told no one. I have $50 billion and no one to leave it to." Patricia leaned forward, partially startled. "Richard, if this is about estate planning—" "Shut up!" he snapped, the familiar cruelty flickering back. "This is about legacy, about redemption if such a thing exists for men like me." He pulled a folder from his desk, thick with documents. "I've been researching you, Miss Martinez. Your mother Maria worked 3 jobs to keep your family afloat after your father died in that construction accident. An accident on one of my buildings, by the way. Substandard safety equipment to save money. I made an extra $1 million in profit that year. Your father was one of 7 men who died because of my greed." The room spun. Elena gripped the arms of her chair, feeling Patricia's hand on her shoulder. "You knew?" Elena whispered. "When you called me worthless, you knew who I was?" "I wanted to see if Jose Martinez's daughter had his spine. He was the only one who complained about the safety conditions, filed reports, tried to protect his co-workers. I had him blacklisted from every construction site in the city. Then he took that job in New Jersey, desperate for work, and—" Blackstone trailed off. "The accident there wasn't my fault, but it might as well have been. If I hadn't destroyed his career here, he'd never have been on that site." Elena was on her feet before she realized she'd moved, Patricia catching her arm before she could do something that would land her in prison. "You destroyed my family," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the rage burning through her. "My mother died believing it was just bad luck, never knowing you deliberately. Yes, I destroyed your family, and the Andersons, and the Kowalskis, and dozens of others. I built my empire on the bones of better men than me. And now I'm dying, and I need to decide what happens to that empire." He pushed the folder across the desk. "I'm establishing a foundation, $50 billion dedicated to affordable housing, worker safety, and supporting families affected by construction accidents. I want you to run it." "What?" "You heard me. Full control, no oversight from my board, a salary of $10 million a year to start. You'd have the power to actually change things, to prevent what happened to your father from happening to others."
Patricia grabbed the folder before Elena could respond, scanning the documents with practiced efficiency. This is real. The legal framework is already in place. He's serious.
But there's a catch, Blackstone said, his shark smile returning. You have to work directly with me for the next 6 months, learn the business, understand the empire you'd be inheriting control over, and you have to forgive me, publicly. A press conference where you absolve me of my sins, where you tell the world that Richard Blackstone died redeemed. No, Elena said immediately. You don't get to buy forgiveness. Then thousands of families continue to suffer. The foundation dies with me, the money goes to various charities that will waste 90 cents of every dollar on administration and galas. He leaned back in his chair. Your principles or their futures? Choose. Elena looked at Patricia, who was still reading, her expression increasingly troubled. There's something else, the lawyer said. A clause here about Morrison development. If Elena accepts, she can never work for Harold Morrison or any of his subsidiaries. Harold's been sniffing around you like a dog with a bone. I won't have him using you to get to me. It's my offer or his, not both. The rain had intensified, beating against the windows like fists. Elena thought of Miguel in his dorm room, studying, of her mother dying in a charity ward because they couldn't afford better care, of her father, whose death she now knew was murder by negligence if not intent. I need time to think, she said. You have 48 hours, then the offer disappears forever. Blackstone stood, the meeting clearly over. The car will take you home, but before you go, let me show you something. He led them through the house to a room she hadn't expected. A chapel, small and pristine, with stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns on the floor. On the altar was a photograph of a young man who looked like a softer version of Richard. James, Elena said. My son. Harold Morrison probably told you about him and Sarah. What he didn't tell you was that I went to him after James died, begged him to forgive me, to let me help with Sarah's foundation. He refused, said I didn't deserve the comfort of making amends. Blackstone touched his son's photo gently. He was right, but that didn't make the punishment any less unbearable. They left him there, alone with his grief and his billions. In the car, Patricia was uncharacteristically quiet until they reached Queens. It's real. The foundation, the money, all of it. You could do immense good with that kind of power. But I'd have to absolve him. Yes? And work with him? Learn from him? Become like him, maybe? Patricia turned to look at her directly. Or maybe you change him. He's dying, Elena. People do strange things when death is no longer abstract. Maybe this is genuine repentance. Or maybe it's just another manipulation. Another game between him and Morrison, with me as the prize. Her phone buzzed. Miguel had sent a photo from a study group, all of them smiling, holding up their graded exams. A+ across the board. Thanks for believing in me, sis. Couldn't do this without you. When Elena got home, she found her apartment full of people. Word had somehow spread through the building about her mysterious summons to the Hamptons. Mrs. Chen from 4A had brought soup, convinced Elena must be hungry. Mr. Rodriguez from 4C had his daughter with him, the one Elena tutored in English when she had time. You look different, Lucha said, like someone important. I'm the same person I was this morning. No, Lucha insisted with the certainty only teenagers possessed. You look like someone who could change things. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She sat at her window, watching the city breathe, lights flickering on and off like synapses firing. At 3 a.m., her phone rang, an unknown number. Miss Martinez? The voice was unfamiliar, elderly, female. My name is Dorothy Walsh. I was James Blackstone's nanny, then the closest thing to family he had after his mother left.
I heard Richard has approached you. How did you... Richard tells me everything when he's drunk, which is most nights now. Please, I need to speak with you. Can you meet me tomorrow, before you make your decision? Elena agreed, and Dorothy gave her an address in Brooklyn. After hanging up, Elena noticed she had another missed call from Bernardin. Marcus had left a voicemail, his voice tight with stress. Elena, you need to know. We've had 3 health inspections in the past 2 days. Someone's targeting the restaurant. If this is because of Blackstone, if he's punishing us for standing by you, just be careful. These people don't play fair. She called him back immediately, but he didn't answer. A text came through instead. Can't talk. Being watched. They fired 2 servers today for minor infractions. They're cleaning house. The next morning, Elena met Dorothy Walsh in a small cafe in Park Slope. She was everything Richard Blackstone wasn't. Warm, worn, real. Her hands shook slightly from age, not fear, as she poured cream into her coffee. I raised James from when he was 3 months old. His mother couldn't stand Richard's coldness, left when she realized he'd never love anything more than money. I stayed because someone had to love that boy. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're really being offered. Richard Blackstone doesn't just destroy his enemies, he destroys everyone who gets close to him. James spent his whole life trying to earn his father's approval, then finally found happiness with Sarah Morrison. When Richard destroyed that relationship, it broke something in James that couldn't be fixed. Dorothy pulled out a letter, yellowed with age. James wrote this to his father the day before he died. Richard never read it, couldn't bear to. But I think you need to. Elena unfolded the letter carefully. James's handwriting was neat, precise. Father, I used to dream that one day you'd see me as more than an heir, more than an extension of your empire. I learned to read financial statements before fairy tales, attended board meetings instead of baseball games. Every achievement I laid at your feet like offerings to an indifferent God. When I met Sarah, she showed me what love without conditions looked like. She didn't care about the Blackstone name or fortune. She loved me for who I was, not what I represented. And you couldn't stand that. You saw it as weakness, as betrayal. You told me love was for people who couldn't afford better options. The night Sarah died, she was crying so hard she could barely see. You'd threatened to destroy her father, to bankrupt Morrison Development, to ensure neither of us would ever know peace if we stayed together. She was driving to meet me, to run away together, when she crashed. You killed her as surely as if you'd cut her brake lines. And now I'm already dead, too. I just haven't stopped breathing yet. I leave you with your empire, Father. May it keep you warm in whatever hell waits for men like you. Elena's hands trembled as she refolded the letter. Dorothy watched her with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. 3 days after James's funeral, Richard tried to kill himself. Pills and whiskey, the coward's way out. I found him, called the ambulance, saved his worthless life. He's been trying to die ever since, but slower, meaner. The cancer is almost a mercy. Why save him? Because I made a promise to James's mother before she left, that I'd keep Richard alive long enough to feel what he'd done to others. That sounds cruel, doesn't it? But you haven't watched a child you raised destroy himself because his father was incapable of love. Elena pushed the letter back across the table. What do you want from me? Nothing. Everything.
I want you to know that if you take his offer, you're not just taking money. You're taking on the ghost of every person Richard Blackstone has destroyed. James, Sarah, your father, hundreds of others. Can you carry that weight?"
Dorothy smiled sadly. "Then you're stronger than James was. But strength isn't always enough. Richard has a way of finding your weakness, exploiting it, making you complicit in your own destruction. Be careful, child. Be smarter than we were." That afternoon, Elena returned to Le Bernardin to find chaos. The restaurant had been shut down by the health department on a spurious violation. A single mouse dropping supposedly found in a kitchen that had been spotless for 15 years. Marcus was outside with the rest of the staff, his face grim. "This is him, isn't it?" Marcus asked. "Blackstone, punishing us for protecting you." Elena felt the familiar weight of guilt settling on her shoulders. "I'll fix this." "How? You can't fight people like him. They own the city, the inspectors, the judges, they own everything." But Elena was already walking away, her phone in her hand. She called the number Patricia Wong had given her. "I need to see Morrison," she said when Patricia answered. "Now." Harold Morrison's office occupied the top floor of a building that scraped the sky. Elena had to go through 3 levels of security to reach him, each checkpoint more intimidating than the last. She found him standing at a wall of windows, the city spread below like a circuit board. "Blackstone shut down Le Bernardin," she said without greeting. "I heard." He didn't turn around. 3 other restaurants that stood up for their workers this year have had similar problems. Richard likes to make examples. "Can you stop it?" "I could, but that would mean declaring war openly. Right now, we maintain the fiction of civilized rivalry. If I intervene directly, people will get hurt, not just fired, hurt." Elena felt her anger building again, that clean rage that had sustained her through her mother's death, through years of poverty, through every injustice that had shaped her life. "So you're all cowards, rich cowards playing games while real people suffer?" Morrison turned then, and she saw something unexpected in his face. Approval. "Good. You're angry. Anger is useful if properly directed." He moved to his desk, pulled out a different folder from the one he'd shown her before. "I've had my people dig deeper into Richard's past. That mysterious seed money that started his empire, it came from a man named Vincent Cordova." "Who?" "A labor leader in the 1970s. He collected pension funds from construction workers, promised to invest them safely. Instead, he gave the money to Richard in exchange for a percentage of future profits. When the workers tried to collect their pension, the fund was empty. Cordova disappeared, probably in the foundation of one of Richard's first buildings, and the workers got nothing." Elena sank into a chair. "He built his empire on stolen pensions?" "Among other things. The documentation is fragmentary, but there's enough. If this went public, it wouldn't just destroy Richard, it would unravel every deal he's ever made. The lawsuits alone would take decades to sort out." "Then why haven't you exposed him?" Morrison's smile was bitter. "Because I'm not clean either. None of us are. You don't build in New York without getting dirty. If I destroy Richard, he'll take me down with him. Sarah's foundation would be liquidated, her memory tarnished by association with my crimes." "Crimes?" "Nothing as dramatic as murder, but yes, bribes mostly, kickbacks, the kind of corruption that everyone does but nobody admits. I told myself it was necessary, that I was better than Richard because I had limits, but dirty is dirty, no matter the degree." Elena stood to leave, disgusted with both of them. Morrison's voice stopped her at the door.
"There's one more thing. The job offer stands, but I'll add something to it. If you come work for me, I'll teach you everything. Not just the legitimate business, but the rest. Where the bodies are buried, who owns whom, how the city really works." And when I die, you'll inherit my position. You'll have the power to change things from the inside. Like Blackstone's offer. Except I'm not asking for absolution. I know what I am. I'm asking you to be better. That evening, Elena stood outside Mount Sinai Hospital. She'd tracked down Richard Blackstone's room through a friend of Sophia's who worked in admissions. He was there for tests, his cancer requiring constant monitoring. She found him alone. No guards, no lawyers, just an old man attached to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. "Come to gloat?" he asked, not opening his eyes. "Come to understand." He opened his eyes then, studied her. "Understanding is overrated. I understood my father perfectly, a drunk who beat my mother and died owing money to everyone on our block. Understanding him didn't make me better. It made me worse, because I knew exactly what not to become and became it anyway. You stole pension funds. Built your empire on money meant for workers' retirements." His laugh was dry as dust. "Morrison's been doing his homework. Yes, I stole. I also killed Vincent Cordova when he tried to blackmail me, hit him with a shovel, buried him in concrete. I was 24 years old, and I felt nothing, still feel nothing. That's the truth you want to understand. I'm not haunted by my crimes. I'm haunted by my inability to feel haunted." Elena studied his face, searching for deception, finding only exhaustion. "Then why the foundation? Why me?" "Because James felt everything I couldn't, every cruelty I inflicted, he absorbed. When he died, it was like losing the part of me that could have been human. You remind me of him, not physically, but in that stubborn insistence on feeling everything even when it hurts. That's not redemption. That's just selfishness in a different shape." "Yes," he agreed simply, "but it's the closest I can come. The foundation will help people, whether my motives are pure or not. Money doesn't care about the soul of the person spending it." A nurse entered to check his vitals, and Elena used the interruption to make a decision that would change everything. "I'll do it. I'll run your foundation, learn your business, even give you the absolution you want. But I have conditions." Blackstone's eyes sharpened, the dying predator sensing opportunity. "Name them." "Le Bernardin reopens tomorrow, all fired staff rehired with full back pay. My brother gets a full scholarship to any school he wants. Every family affected by your substandard safety practices gets a settlement, not charity, legal acknowledgement of responsibility. And Dorothy Walsh gets a pension that ensures she never worries about money again. That's millions of dollars. You have billions, and 6 months to live. What's money to a dead man?" He laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "You're going to be magnificent. Morrison has no idea what he's losing." He pressed a button on his phone, summoning his lawyer. "Draw it up, all of it. Ms. Martinez starts Monday." As Elena left the hospital, she felt the weight of her decisions settling over her like a shroud. She'd made a deal with the devil to help angels. The only question now was whether she could dance in hell without catching fire. Monday arrived with the kind of pristine September morning that made New York feel like a movie set. Elena stood outside the Blackstone Industries Tower on Fifth Avenue, wearing one of 3 suits Patricia Wong had insisted she buy with Blackstone's money. "You're entering a world where appearance is armor. Don't give them any ammunition," Patricia had said.
The lobby was a cathedral of marble and ambition, designed to make visitors feel small. Elena refused to be diminished. She walked to the executive elevator bank, where a security guard checked her name against a list, his eyes widening slightly when he found it. 52nd floor, he said, handing her a black key card. "Mr. Blackstone's private offices. Someone will meet you." The elevator rose in silence, no muzak to soften the ascent. When the doors opened, Elena stepped into a world of hushed voices and hidden power. The receptionist, a woman who looked carved from expensive marble herself, didn't smile. "Miss Martinez? I'm Vivian Cross, Mr. Blackstone's executive assistant. He's in a board meeting, but asked that you wait in his office. This way. The office was larger than Elena's entire apartment building's footprint. One wall was entirely glass, offering a view that reduced the city to a manageable abstraction. Another wall held paintings she recognized from art history classes, actual Picassos and Pollocks, not reproductions. "Don't touch anything," Vivian said coldly. "Some of these items are worth more than you'll make in a lifetime." "Even at 10 million a year?" Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "He told you the salary?" "Among other things." Before Vivian could respond, the door burst open. A man in his 40s stormed in, his face twisted with rage. "Where is he? Where's that dying bastard?" "Mr. Ashford," Vivian stepped between him and Elena. "Mr. Blackstone is... I know where he is, sitting in that boardroom pretending he hasn't just destroyed my company." He noticed Elena then, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Who the hell are you?" "Elena Martinez?" Recognition dawned on his face. "The waitress. The one from the restaurant." Of course, Richard always did love his symbolism, replacing us with someone from the bottom, someone pure and untainted by our world. "Replacing? He hasn't told you?" Ashford moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Richard is liquidating everything. Every partnership, every joint venture. He's burning 40 years of relationships and calling it restructuring. My company depended on Blackstone Industries contracts. Without them, I'll be bankrupt by Christmas." "I'm sorry." He turned on her, finger pointing like a weapon. "You're sorry? You're about to inherit an empire built on the corpses of companies like mine, and you're sorry?" He stepped closer, and Elena could smell the whiskey on his breath, despite it being barely noon. "Do you know what Richard Blackstone really is? What you're getting into?" "I'm learning." "No, you're not. You're seeing what he wants you to see. The repentant dying man, the guilty father, the philanthropist in waiting." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos. "This was my daughter's wedding last year. Richard was there, gave a toast about the importance of family. 2 weeks later, he initiated a hostile takeover of my biggest client. The stress caused my heart attack. My daughter had to postpone her honeymoon to sit by my hospital bed." The door opened again. Richard Blackstone entered, looking frailer than he had in the hospital, but with eyes that remained sharp as surgical instruments. "Tom?" Security called. "You're not supposed to be in the building."
Like hell I was. Ashford pulled a gun from his jacket, the black metal catching the light from the windows. Everything slowed. Elena saw Vivian reaching for the panic button, saw Blackstone's eyes widening, not with fear, but with something like satisfaction, saw the gun swinging between them like a drunk compass needle searching for north. "Go ahead," Blackstone said softly. "You'd be doing me a favor. Quicker than cancer, more dignified than wasting away." "You don't get dignity," Ashford's voice broke. "You don't get to die a martyr." Elena moved without thinking, stepping between them. "Mr. Ashford, please, your daughter. Think about your daughter." "I am thinking about her, about the world I'm leaving her, where men like him decide who lives and who dies economically." The gun shook in his hand. "Get out of the way." "No." "I'll shoot through you. Then you'll be a murderer instead of a victim. Is that the legacy you want?" The standoff stretched, 10 seconds feeling like 10 years. Then Ashford lowered the gun, sobbing. Security rushed in, wrestled him to the ground, but Elena knelt beside him. "I'll look at your contracts," she said quietly. "When I take over the foundation, I'll review everyone Richard hurt. I can't undo the damage, but maybe I can help with what comes next." Ashford looked at her through his tears. "You mean that?" "Yes." As security dragged him away, Blackstone watched Elena with an expression she couldn't read. "You just promised money that isn't yours yet." "I said I'd have full control." "Of the foundation, not my personal vendettas." He sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "Harold Morrison embezzled $300,000 from our joint venture. I have proof.
Never used it because destroying him publicly would have hurt his family. Taking away his contracts was mercy. Why didn't you tell him that? Because he needed someone to hate more than himself. If he hates me, he stays angry. If he hates himself, he eats that gun he brought. He opened a drawer, pulled out a thick folder. This is Harold Morrison, your white knight, your alternative to my darkness. The documents detailed bribes, affairs, a covered-up drunk driving incident from 15 years ago. He killed a homeless man, Elena, hit him at 2 in the morning, kept driving. His lawyers made it disappear, but I have the police report, the original one, before it was altered. Elena felt the floor shifting beneath her feet. You're lying. I'm many things, but not a liar. Call Morrison. Ask him about February 15th, 2010. Watch his face when you do. She pulled out her phone, dialed Morrison's number with numb fingers. He answered on the second ring. Elena, I heard about Ashford. Are you? February 15th, 2010. Silence. Then, quietly, Richard told you. It's true? Yes. No elaboration, no excuse, just the single word that shattered Elena's understanding of him. She hung up without another word. Blackstone watched her process this revelation, his expression almost sympathetic. Welcome to the real world, Miss Martinez, where everyone is compromised and the only choice is between degrees of evil. He stood, moved to a hidden panel in the wall that opened to reveal a safe. Which brings us to your real inheritance. From the safe, he pulled a laptop, its surface unmarked by logos or identification. This contains everything. Every crime, every cover-up, every skeleton in every closet of every major player in New York real estate. It's my insurance policy, gathered over 40 years. With this, you could destroy anyone in this city, or protect yourself from them. Why would you give this to me? Because I'm dying, and someone needs to hold the leash on these monsters. Morrison thinks he's offering you power. This is real power. The power to ensure that the foundation survives after I'm dead, that my enemies don't dismantle everything out of spite. Elena stared at the laptop like it was a bomb. This is blackmail. This is leverage. Without it, you're just an idealistic girl with a checkbook. With it, you're untouchable. Before Elena could respond, Vivian knocked and entered. Mr. Blackstone, there's been a development. The Times has the story about Mr. Martinez. Elena's blood turned to ice. My father? Vivian handed Blackstone a tablet showing a news alert. Exclusive, Blackstone Industries tied to 2008 construction deaths. Families demand justice. Someone leaked it, Blackstone said, studying the article. Someone with access to sealed records. He looked at Elena. This will destroy the announcement of the foundation, make it look like guilt money, which of course it is. Elena read the article, saw her father's picture, saw her own name mentioned as a recent hire at Blackstone Industries, despite her father being among the victims. The reporter had done their homework. They had quotes from other families, documentation of safety violations, everything. Morrison, Blackstone said with certainty. He leaked this to force your hand. Now you can't publicly forgive me without looking like you've been bought. Elena's phone buzzed with texts. Miguel, horrified. Sophia and Carmen, worried. Marcus, offering support. The life she'd built, carefully separated from her father's tragedy, was collapsing. I need to go, she said. If you leave now, you don't come back. This is the test, Elena. Can you stand in the fire without running? She thought of Tom Ashford's tears, of Morrison's hit and run, of her father's photograph in the Times looking young and hopeful. The press conference. We move it up to today. What? Call them now, every major outlet. Say Richard Blackstone and the daughter of one of his victims will be making a joint statement about the foundation and the article. She turned to face him fully. "You want absolution? Let's see if you can earn it." 3 hours later, Elena stood in the Blackstone Industries press room, facing a wall of cameras and skeptical reporters. Richard sat beside her, looking frail but determined. She'd refused the prepared statement his lawyers had written, choosing instead to speak from memory and pain. "My name is Elena Martinez. My father, Jose Martinez, died in 2008 in a construction accident that could have been prevented if Richard Blackstone had valued lives over profit. For 15 years, I believed it was just bad luck. Today, I learned the truth."
The room erupted with questions. She raised her hand for silence. "Mr. Blackstone called me worthless a week ago. He was right, in his world's terms. I have no money, no power, no influence. But I have something he spent 68 years avoiding: the ability to face truth without flinching. My father is dead because of corporate greed. Nothing will bring him back. But with Mr. Blackstone's foundation, we can ensure other fathers come home safely." A reporter shouted, "Are you forgiving him?" Elena looked at Blackstone, saw James in his eyes, Sarah in his trembling hands, her father in the space between heartbeats. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give. It belongs to the dead, and they're not here to offer it. But I can choose what to do with my anger. I can let it consume me, or I can forge it into something useful. The foundation will save lives. That matters more than my pain or Mr. Blackstone's guilt." "Mr. Blackstone," another reporter called, "do you admit responsibility for Jose Martinez's death?" Blackstone stood slowly, gripping the podium. "I admit to valuing money over lives. I admit to creating conditions that made deaths like Mr. Martinez's inevitable. I admit to being the kind of man who could sleep peacefully while families mourned losses I could have prevented." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "I am dying of cancer. I could have died quietly, my crimes buried with me. Instead, I choose to die loudly, with full acknowledgement of what I've done. The foundation isn't absolution. It's an admission of guilt that will outlive me." The press conference continued for another hour, questions flying like arrows, each answer revealing more of the truth. When it ended, Elena and Blackstone stood alone in the empty room. "You didn't give me what I wanted. No, I gave you what you needed, the truth without varnish." He smiled, the expression almost genuine. "You're going to be better at this than I ever was." That evening, Elena found herself back in Washington Heights, sitting in her apartment with her roommates, Miguel on speakerphone from El Paso. The news coverage played on their laptop, talking heads debating whether she was a hero or a sellout, whether Blackstone's confession was genuine or calculated. "I don't understand," Miguel said. "He killed Dad, essentially, and you're working with him?" "I'm working with his money," Elena corrected. "Money that can save other fathers." "But what about justice?" Elena looked out the window at the city lights, each one representing a life, a story, a potential tragedy or triumph. Her phone rang. Dorothy Walsh. "I watched the press conference. You did something I didn't think possible. You made Richard Blackstone tell the truth. He's still who he is. Yes, but now everyone knows it. James would have been proud of you. Sarah, too." Dorothy paused. "Be careful, child. Richard may be dying, but wounded animals are the most dangerous." After she hung up, Elena found herself holding the black laptop Blackstone had given her. She opened it, entered the password he'd provided. File after file appeared. Crimes, secrets, leverage. Harold Morrison's hit and run. Tom Ashford's embezzlement.
dozens of others, each folder a life that could be destroyed with a click. At the bottom, a folder marked E. Martinez. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were documents about her family, her mother's medical records, Miguel's college applications, even her own employee records from every job she'd held. But at the bottom, something else. A DNA test. Richard Blackstone was her grandfather. The room spun. Elena read the document 3 times, cross-referenced it with others in the folder. Her grandmother, Rosa Martinez, had worked as a maid in the Blackstone household in 1975. She'd left suddenly, married Jose Martinez Sr. within a month, never spoke of her time with the Blackstones. Her father had been born 7 months later.
Richard had known. When he'd called her worthless, when he'd let her father die, when he'd offered her the foundation, he'd known they were blood. She was still staring at the screen when Blackstone called. "You found it," he said without preamble. "You're my grandfather. You killed your own son." "I didn't know until after Jose died. I had everyone who'd ever worked for me investigated after James's suicide, looking for, I don't know what. Meaning, maybe. I found you instead." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have refused everything, thinking it was nepotism rather than merit. You needed to believe you earned this on your own terms." Elena laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "My own terms? You've been pulling strings since before I was born." "No, I've been absent since before you were born. There's a difference." His voice grew weaker. "Your grandmother was the only woman I ever loved. But I was married, building my empire. I gave her money to disappear. She took it, used it to build a life where her son would never know his father was a monster. She was right to do it." Elena closed the laptop, her hand steady despite the revelation burning through her veins. She called Blackstone back. "I accept everything," she said. "The foundation, the truth, the blood we share. But on one condition, you tell the world, no more secrets. That will destroy what's left of my legacy." "Good. Let's build something honest from the ashes." 6 months later, Elena stood at Richard Blackstone's funeral. He'd lived long enough to see the foundation's first housing project break ground on the site where her father had died. His final press conference had revealed everything: the stolen pensions, the covered-up deaths, even his abandoned son. Harold Morrison attended, shook Elena's hand without speaking. They understood each other now. Both compromised, both trying. Miguel graduated with honors. Dorothy Walsh moved into foundation housing. Le Bernardin thrived. Elena kept the laptop, its secrets now her burden and her shield. She'd learned what Blackstone never could, that true power wasn't dominating others, but lifting them up while acknowledging the weight of your own sins. She was her grandfather's heir, but she would not be his echo.